Isaiah 13 through 14, Jeremiah 50 through 51, and Revelation 18 are the main passages in Scripture which contain the prophecies regarding the total destruction of Babylon. They give many details which will help us to identify the fulfillment, whether this destruction has occurred in the past or if it is yet to occur in the future. As I think you will see as we study these details, the destruction of Babylon is not figurative, not symbolic, and not allegorical. Figurative language refers to any words that are used with a meaning other than their common literal sense. Common examples of figures of speech often used in Scripture are simile, metaphor, metonymy, and synecdoche. There may be figures of speech in the prophecies regarding the destruction of Babylon, but the entire prophecy isn't figurative, and the figures of speech still represent something actual. Symbols are one thing taken to represent something else, often a material object representing the intangible. Many times what each symbol represents is explicitly explained in the scripture passages. Examples of prophecies that are explicitly symbolic are many of the visions in Zechariah, such as Zechariah 5, and many of the visions in Revelation, such as Revelation 17. Allegorical means that it has hidden spiritual meaning that transcends the literal sense of the text. This makes the meaning subject to the person reading it, who can make it mean anything he or she chooses. To understand the Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Revelation passages, it's important to read all of them in context and to keep the following in mind. Isaiah chapters 13 through 14 constitute one prophecy, until chapter 14 verses 23 through 32. Be sure to ignore the man-made chapter break. The entire prophecy is one unit that was given at one time. Also, within chapter 14, there is a song that Israel sings that is one unit and should be considered as a whole. Then the final verses, 23 through 32, are a new prophecy regarding Philistia, so we will not be reviewing those verses. Jeremiah chapters 50 through 51 also constitute one prophecy until chapter 51 verses 59 through 64. Again, ignore the man-made chapter break. In chapter 51, the last 6 verses, 59 through 64, are a description of how Jeremiah wrote the prophecy of Babylon on one scroll, and it also describes what was to be done with the scroll. This further indicates that it was one prophecy given at one time. Unlike the other passages, Revelation 17 and 18 are divided up correctly. They are 2 separate prophecies indicated by verse 1 of chapter 18. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven. The focus in chapter 17 is on the woman who is riding the beast, which is thought to be the religious system of Babylon. The rest of the chapter is regarding the beast she is riding on, which isn't Babylon. Chapter 17 is explicitly symbolic, and the interpretation of the symbols is given in the chapter itself, so we will not be reviewing the information in this chapter. Chapter 18 is regarding the literal destruction of the city of Babylon. The 3 prophets of this event are Isaiah, who was a prophet to Israel from the reign of King Uzziah through the reign of King Hezekiah, according to Isaiah 1:1. Jeremiah was a prophet from the days of King Josiah to King Zedekiah, according to Jeremiah 1:1 through 3. John the Apostle, who wrote the book of Revelation, lived from 6 to 100 AD and wrote Revelation while on the island of Patmos during the reign of the Roman Emperor Domitian. We will see that the destruction of Babylon is a description of an actual literal event. It is an actual city of Babylon in the land of Chaldea. There are actual nations and troops attacking from the literal north, and actual weapons being used to kill actual human beings by the invading troops. And there is actual physical destruction. Other details included are the suddenness of the destruction, the actual results of the destruction, and the purpose for the destruction. The first point that is made abundantly clear is that it is referring to literal Babylon as indicated by the use of the variations of the phrase Babylon in the land of Chaldea. If I were to tell you that I'm from Spokane in the land of Washington, you would know that I'm talking about the literal city of Spokane in the state of Washington. These passages are speaking of the literal city of Babylon in the land of Chaldea. The Jewish Encyclopedia states, "The land of the Chaldeans is also a frequently occurring phrase. The Chaldean country, in the strict sense, lay in southern Babylonia on the lower Euphrates and Tigris, as shown here in the map of the Babylonian Empire. But the name was extended by the biblical writers to include the whole of Babylonia after the Chaldean Nebuchadnezzar had established the new Babylonian Empire and brought his people to worldwide fame. The phrase or variations of the phrase Babylon in the land of the Chaldeans appears 8 times altogether in the Jeremiah and Isaiah passages. It appears in the first verse of Jeremiah's prophecy regarding Babylon, where it says, "This is the message that the Lord spoke through the prophet Jeremiah about Babylon, the land of the Chaldeans." Here are the rest of the verses that use that phrase. Babylon, that jewel of kingdoms, the splendor and pride of the Chaldeans. Move away from Babylon and go out of the land of the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans will become plunder. Heavenly armies will be in the land of the Chaldeans. The slain will fall in the land of Chaldea, pierced through in the streets. Before your eyes I'll repay Babylon and all the inhabitants of Chaldea. The sound of a cry is coming from Babylon, great destruction from the land of the Chaldeans. It is clear that this is speaking of a literal place being destroyed. There is no indication that it is meant to be taken figuratively. Jeremiah 50:21 points out 2 specific places included in this destruction. They are Merathaim and Pekod, which are both in the same area as Chaldea. All of these indicate that the destruction will come upon the literal Babylon in the land of Chaldea. Next, we have actual nations and troops attacking from the north. Jeremiah 51:38 tells us that the Medes, including their governors, prefects, and every land under their dominion, will come against Babylon. 3 of those kingdoms under their dominion are specifically named, the kingdoms of Ararat, Minni, and Ashkenaz. They were kingdoms which had been conquered and made vassal states by the Medes in the early 6th century. And Isaiah 13:17 makes it clear that they are not motivated by financial gains such as silver and gold. The troops attacking are mentioned in a number of places in the Jeremiah prophecy. They are called troops, warriors, and soldiers. These nations are attacking from or out of the north and from afar. Actual weapons are being used to kill actual human beings. The weapons specifically mentioned are bows, arrows, spears, swords, and fire and smoke. Both Isaiah and Jeremiah indicate that actual human beings will be killed. Bows dash the young men to pieces, no pity shown to the unborn, and they will not spare children. They don't spare the young men. The slain will fall in the land of Chaldea, pierced through in her streets. Her warriors will fall in her streets, and her soldiers will be silenced in that day. There is also actual physical destruction. The walls are thrown down. The broad wall of Babylon will be completely leveled, its high gates set on fire. The bars of the gates will be broken, and the pillars will have fallen. The buildings will be set on fire. The city will be set on fire, and marshes will be burned with fire. Another detail given is the suddenness of the destruction. Revelation 18, verses 8, 9, 17, and 19 all indicate a sudden destruction. Revelation 18 verse 8 comes from a voice speaking from heaven which states that Babylon's destruction will come in a single day. According to Thayer's lexicon, hemera in this case is being used of the civil day or the space of 24 hours. So the voice is literally saying that Babylon will be destroyed within 1 day's time. All of the other verses are quoting the kings of the earth who say that her destruction will come in a single hour. According to Thayer's lexicon, the Greek word hora is being used to indicate a very short time. One way or the other, this is not contradictory, since something that happens in 1 hour also by definition happens in a single day. But it seems that the voice from heaven is declaring it will occur in an actual day, whereas the kings of the earth are just indicating that it occurs in a very short period of time. Also, Jeremiah 51:8 states, "Suddenly Babylon fell and was shattered." The results of the destruction is described as being like Sodom and Gomorrah, in that it will never again be inhabited by human beings, and it will become a home for unclean birds and certain other unclean beasts. It is important to understand that this comparison with Sodom and Gomorrah does not include the method by which Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. Isaiah 13:19-22 lists a number of creatures that will inhabit Babylon. But desert beasts will lie down there, and their houses will be full of howling creatures. There owls will dwell, and goat demons will dance there. Hyenas will howl in its strongholds, and jackals will make their den in its citadels. One interesting creature is the goat demon, which is translated satyrs in the King James Version and is defined in the Genesius Hebrew Chaldee lexicon as wood demons, satyrs, resembling he-goats, inhabiting deserts. Surprisingly, there will be some type of demonic entities. In Revelation 18:2 it states, "Fallen, Babylon the Great has fallen. She has become a home for demons. She is a prison for every unclean spirit, a prison for every unclean bird, and a prison for every unclean and hated beast." Moving on to other details, Jeremiah 51:26 indicates that the building materials will never be reused. They won't get a cornerstone or a foundation stone from you because you will be a wasteland forever, declares the Lord. Other results of the destruction include that God will eliminate from Babylon her name and survivors, her offsprings and descendants. The Chaldeans will become plunder. She will become the least of the nations, a wilderness, a dry land, and a desert. Babylon will become a heap of ruins, a refuge for jackals, and a desolate place and an object of scorn. And finally is the purpose for the destruction. It is given as repayment for all the evil that Babylon did in Zion, its vengeance for his temple, and it's because she has behaved arrogantly against the Lord, against the Holy One of Israel, and because of the slain of Israel. Jeremiah 51:60 states that Jeremiah wrote on a single scroll all the disasters that would come on Babylon, all these things that were written about Babylon. Jeremiah told Seraiah, "When you come to Babylon, see that you read all these words and say, 'Lord, you have declared about this place that you would destroy it, so that there wouldn't be an inhabitant in it, neither human nor animal, because it will be a wasteland forever.'" This declaration that no animal will inhabit it seems to be a contradiction to the earlier description of possible animals inhabiting Babylon after the destruction. In the English language, the word animal would be understood to include the entire animal kingdom. This also corresponds to an earlier statement in the Jeremiah prophecy, in Jeremiah 50, verse 3, when it states that no one will live in it, both people and animals will wander off. The Hebrew word translated animals in both of these passages is the same Hebrew word, which is behemah, and can be translated beast, animal, cattle, as distinguished in the Old Testament from birds, fish, and reptiles. This term denotes four-footed animals, especially cattle. The Septuagint translates the Hebrew word with the Greek word katanos, which has a very similar definition. A beast, especially of a beast of burden, used for four-legged animals as opposed to fish and birds. But the Genesius Hebrew Chaldee lexicon states that it refers to large land quadrupeds. Since the Hebrew word behemah is most likely only referring to large land quadrupeds, there's no contradiction to the idea of hyenas, jackals, and other creatures still inhabiting Babylon. It also doesn't include birds. Revelation 18:2 states that it will be a prison for every unclean and hated beast, but the Greek word translated beast isn't the same Greek word that was used to translate behemah in the Jeremiah passage. It is a different kind of beast. Therion is a beast or a wild animal, and it is the same word used to describe the beast of Revelation. Jeremiah continues in 51:61, "When you finish reading this scroll, tie a rock around it and throw it into the middle of the Euphrates. Then say, 'Babylon will sink like this and won't rise from the disaster that I'm bringing on her. Her people will be exhausted.'" Revelation 18:16-17 gives a similar symbolic gesture. "Then a powerful angel picked up a stone that was like a large millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, 'The great city Babylon will be thrown down violently and will never be found again.'" The prophecies regarding the destruction of Babylon given in Isaiah 13-14, Jeremiah 50-51, and Revelation 18 give the following details indicated by this chart. The destruction of Babylon occurs in actual Babylon in the land of Chaldea. There are actual nations and troops attacking from the north, actual weapons used to kill actual human beings. There is actual physical destruction. It results in Babylon never being inhabited again by human beings, but it will be inhabited by certain unclean animals and, surprisingly, demonic entities. The building materials will never be reused. It will occur suddenly in a day, and its primary purpose is repayment for all of the evil that Babylon did in Zion. The abundance of the details makes it clear that this is describing an actual literal event and is not symbolic, allegorical, or figurative. Anyone should be able to use these details to look for future fulfillment and also to look back in history to see if they have ever been fulfilled in the past.